Thank you. The story I'm going to tell you starts in Paris, where I'm studying anthropology at the Sorbonne, and and this is a talk about luxury, but I am dirt poor at this time. My mission is to better understand what makes humans humans. Who are we? Why do we do what we do? And I will discover that part of the answer to that is staring at me right in the face. Now, what I'm doing while living in my sixth floor walk-up chambre de bonne in the garrets of a Parisian apartment building is I'm driving a Mercedes-Benz 450 SCL with state-of-the-art electronic everything in it. And the reason I'm doing that is I've snagged a job as a luxury chauffeur. My clients are Saudi and Moroccan royals, and I now find myself a servant to the ultra-rich, schlepping them around town to their places of purchase. So what do we servants of the ultra-rich talk about? We talk about our clients. We talk about whether their fame and fortune has gone to their head. Do they treat their lessers with contempt? Do they understand the value of the things that they're buying? I became, like all servants of the ultra-rich, a connoisseur of their lifestyles without actually being able to afford them on my own. I wasn't just studying anthropology, I was an anthropologist through my work to pay for my studies. One of my clients was a certain prince who was visiting Paris for 2 weeks, and he ordered 6 of us chauffeurs, and when we weren't driving, we were all hanging out by our cars, of course, talking about our clients. And we knew that Her Highness, his wife, the princess, was due in town the next day. So we already knew what the prince was like, what would she be like. And the night before she arrived, the prince had brought to his residence in Paris a pair of twins who were call girls. And so that was now in our data set about our client. And so part of our conversation, therefore, was what would the princess be like and what might be going on between them. We saw her come down the next day to go do her purchases, which began at Dior on Avenue Montaigne, Paris's most luxurious address. And we saw that she was classy and carried herself very well, striking in appearance. And we learned with great interest that as she was walking towards Dior on the street in Avenue Montaigne, she stopped in front of a piece of bread, a little morsel of baguette that was lying on the street, and pulled her Hermès scarf out of her Dior bag and quickly enfolded the bread inside the scarf and then put that away inside of her purse. And she explained, I hope this doesn't look strange what I'm doing, but in my culture, bread is sacred, and to leave it lying on the street unattended like that is disrespectful, if not sacrilegious. That's why I did that. And as we shared that story, that observation among us chauffeurs of hers, we suddenly were a little bit ashamed at the scurrilous gossip that we were having about the sex life of our royal clients, and we were now impressed because we realized that we stood in the presence of a true lady. I was reading at the time a masterpiece of anthropology by Ernest Becker entitled The Denial of Death. Becker's great insight is that the inevitable mortality that each of us will suffer is such a distressing subject that we dismiss it from our everyday lives and from our conscious minds. We put it away, but the unconscious mind is tormented by the knowledge that we will all die. And so Becker points out that many of us form what he calls immortality projects, pointing out that is not having children itself a defense against death, a way of still being alive past your own demise? Is not the friends that you keep who you want to tell stories about you, grateful stories, hopefully, after you've passed, is that not also an immortality project? Is not that book you're writing? Is not your pursuit of a Con Golden Lion? Forming a school of thought? If you're quite fortunate, having a building named after you or your idea, all of them immortality projects. And I remember thinking to myself that the princess that day, on her way to buy another bag at Dior while saving a sacred piece of bread, were not both of those actions of hers defenses against death by trying to live as elevated a life as possible? So I graduated, I got my degree, and I found work in my early days as brand anthropologist. And I was happy that I took a passion of mine and made it into a way to make at least some money. And my Timex watch from my student days broke. I needed a new one. And now I had enough money to maybe buy a good watch. And I did some research and I found that you could get a discontinued Rolex. This was the last year that they were making the manual rewind Rolexes, and you could get an oyster, a stainless steel oyster, at a affordable price. And I liked it, and I liked how it looked. And I said, now this would be a good purchase because it might even outlast me. And so I bought my Rolex, and its subdued, streamlined stainless steel elegance, and I affirmed my emerging status. And it was elegant enough that none of my friends made fun of me. And then a philosopher I knew, a professional philosopher who was about 10 years further in her career than me, she suddenly purchased a watch that was far more valuable than my Rolex, a watch by the name Patek Philippe, which I was familiar with from my days as a luxury chauffeur. And I was astonished that someone I actually knew and who was a member of Parisian intelligentsia would buy a Patek Philippe. And so I asked her, why did you get that? And she said, oh, well, you know, it's a Patek Philippe. It's been made by many generations of the same family in the mountains of Jura, and no two are exactly alike. Each one is handmade. They don't even keep time very well, but they're works of art. And now I have a portable work of art on my wrist. And I remember thinking to myself, hers too is an immortality project. And so I was not surprised when Patek Philippe introduced the rather marvelous advertising campaign saying, you never actually own a Patek Philippe, you merely look after it for the next generation. So hers too, was it not also very clearly announced by the advertising strategy itself, an immortality project? So I began to realize that there were two things going on in luxury. One, when I purchase a luxurious object, I'm making a selfish act. I'm affirming my own status and self-belief. But the more overt the selfishness of my act, the more I need a story to offset that selfishness. And so we could actually plot it as two big values. I borrow from Latin the word pretium, which means precious, but also means price or value. So every luxurious object is removed from everyday life by its pretium. And the other dimension is the historia, made by the same family in the mountains of Jura. They don't actually keep very good time, but each one is a work of art. This is historia, the Greek word from which we get history, but story, and it also includes in it the idea of wit, showing some cleverness. So a luxury brand can always be plotted on both its pretium and its historia. So then I could put my Rolex on there at a fairly low point of that and see it and contrast that with the relative historia of that purchase. Now, if something is all pretium and low in historia, that is, you're showing off, making a big, loud statement about yourself. And I illustrate that with something that's all pretium, which is the bling in a gangster rap video. So the king of camp, John Waters, once said, I like gangster rap, but some of those videos, it's just the rapper bragging about how rich they are to people who are poor. That's not cool. So let's see a gangster rap video about somebody buying a Cy Twombly painting or dating a museum curator. To the best of my knowledge, John Waters' challenge has not been taken up yet. And then if something is all historia but low in pretium, what is that? Well, that's the curios, the mementos, the interesting objects that start conversations. That's hipster. So we could keep on plotting the watch category, and we could go a little bit further out from the Patek Philippe, add another $5,000 to the price tag, and you could get a Rolex Daytona. When many people think of the flashy Rolex watch, they're thinking about a Daytona. So this one is gold, and it doesn't have much of this historia behind it. It's people know what it is and what it costs. You're almost wearing fungible currency on your wrist. This chap who's the head of big pharma security in one of the Jason Bourne movies, Aaron Cross, the hero, will punch him in the back of the neck, and when he falls unconscious, lift it off of his wrist, and he'll use this watch to pay his way to safety. It's almost like pure money. You could contrast that by going into the historia now, and you could buy for only $1,000 this gorgeous Max Bill. So this is a watch inspired by and named after the founder of the Swiss design movement. So simple, so elegant. It's got Swiss movements, it's German made. You can get one for $1,000 approximately. You will not impress any hedge fund manager by owning this watch, but you will fit right in at a TED talk wearing the Max Bill. So let's keep going out now further along the line of pretium and historia. We could get for just a little bit more than the Rolex Daytona, about $5,000 extra dollars, you could carry around this watch, which is made from the remains of the Éja-Foucault volcano, the one that shut down European air travel in 2010. Here are some remnants of it made into a watch. So it's very showy, but it has a great story behind it. Well, we could go further out in price, and for $150,000, we could buy a Breva. This is an extraordinary piece of timekeeping that also has in it a miniature weather station, including a very sensitive barometer. If you happen to be at the top of the Swiss Alps, where there's no more 4G, 5G, and your phone isn't going to tell you what the weather forecast is, this will tell you if there's a sudden drop in atmospheric pressure and that you need to move quickly and get out of the way of a fast arriving storm in the top of the mountains. This you can get from a Breva. It has both rareness and an interesting story and a reflection of an entire imaginary lifestyle that is wrapped around it. We can go even further out, and we could get a Bulgari brigella. Brigella is one of the four characters of the ancient theatrical troupe Commedia dell'arte, dating all the way back to the High Middle Ages. And each one of these has been made with superfine, advanced micro animatronics. And so at the appointed hour, the entire watch begins to perform an act of the character brigella. So there are only a few of these made. There are only a few people in the world who have the know-how to make one. One can be yours for a mere $800,000. Get your orders in now. I think there's only 8 left. So we can go even further out now to the ultimate point of extreme in both Pretium and Historia by contemplating this single-piece Colombian emerald that has been made into a working pocket watch in approximately the year 1640. So a watchmaker living in the Cheapside district of London was making this for an unknown member of the royal family. Who else could afford such a pocket watch? And departed to the civil wars. He hid it very carefully and never came back from the wars. And he hid it so beautifully that the Great Fire of London never reached this and destroyed it. And it wasn't until the year 1912 that a demolition crew in the Cheapside district found the Cheapside hoard. This is beyond price. You could never get this, but you can see it for free at the London Museum. Ask for the Cheapside hoard. So this would be at the furthest out point of Pretium and Historia. So you can actually map the category, and if you're a strategist, try to find an interesting spot or a new twist on how to occupy an existing spot. The other thing I've learned about luxury is our luxury objects, they often have a talismanic quality. Whether we know it consciously or not, they give us a certain magic. We believe that they bless us by their presence in our lives. You can see it when people have their lucky objects that are rare and unique and have interesting stories. I believe that our luxury experiences also are liminal in nature, which in anthropology means anything that takes you from one state to another. When someone gets married, that's a liminal event. When someone confers a degree upon you in a ceremony, another liminal event. And so I think we sometimes want our everyday luxury objects to be both talismanic and liminal, to give us powers, to tell who we are and where we're going. Because both of these things defend us against the inevitability of death by connecting us to as elevated a life as we can find. So, to me, the princess, both the princess and the prince have passed on, but I remember the princess. Her immortality project worked, at least with me. And as for the prince, well, at least he had the intelligence to marry the princess. And as for my Rolex, did it outlive me? I cannot give you a certain knowledge of that, for you see, one day I gave it to a beautiful woman, and later on she broke up with me, but not with the Rolex. So I'm unable to tell you any more of that story. But I did ultimately meet the woman I was supposed to meet, and when I got married to her, I made a luxury object with talismanic and liminal powers for myself. I have it here. It's a simple gold ring, but what I did was inscribe on it her name in her native Mandarin and surrounded that with a little piece of Gregorian chant that is sung on Maundy Thursday when the priest imitates Christ by washing the feet of the congregation. And I thought, what a good thing to have on a wedding ring, those words, ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. Wherever there is love and kindness, there too is God. It cost me about $650, but it is my biggest luxury project because it has my whole story in it. So I can't tell you that this is very high in Pretium, but very high in Historia. Does that make me a hipster? You decide. And I wish you the best of luck in finding your luxury objects. May you enjoy them for all that they're worth, and may you understand them for all that they mean. Thank you very much.